Maple syrup!
syrup!
Yay!
Yay!
Hey, that was our first duet ever. That was awesome.
It worked. It never dropped either. That was
amazing. And
awesome.
we will never speak of that again. I don't think I can coordinate another one. Thanks so much for coming, Emily. It's wonderful to see you. And we're all hailing from the Eastern time zone. Where are you?
I am currently in the Eastern time zone. I'm in the Dominican Republic, which is still on Eastern time until daylight savings, and then I think we're off by an hour.
Oh, right, because we go through the savings and you don't.
Yeah.
Because we are penny pinchers with our minutes and seconds, I guess. No, it's just because
recognized.
It's just because it's not recognized, and it's also just because it's real dark here, and it probably isn't as dark down there.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's like health concerns about like not adjusting the daylight. There is. People get sad. We need daylight.
We do. But I still dislike daylight savings. But
I know it's
because it messes
weird
with me for like a couple days.
But it's good psychologically.
Sure. Okay. Cool. So welcome Emily Willix to the show in the Dominican Republic, coming in off of the internet. That's the greatest thing about the internet, is that we can connect with people in faraway places, anywhere, no matter where they are, whether they live in a house or an apartment or a boat. If they live in a boat, we can connect with them. Live from you definitely have been the first person to play ukulele with me, which is awesome.
Thank you.
B, come in from a boat. That is also awesome. So let's ask that magical question. Emily Willix, who are you? How did you get here? How did this all become about games for you? What's your origin story?
Sure, my origin story. I'll start when I got into games, which started about a year ago, I want to say. I was actually having some health problems at the time, which was preventing me from sort of like sitting and walking and doing a lot of mobile things. So I was just being very sedentary. And I was actually shopping for some game pieces to create my own version of Survive Escape from Atlantis.
Okay.
And I stumbled upon this thing called the Game Crafter, where you can not only buy game pieces, but create your own game. And I was like, wow, that's kind of neat. So I started, getting some ideas and different things like that. And then my birthday, my mother-in-law got me a book on game design written by Joe Slack. And I read it, and I was super excited about it. I joined the Board Game Design Lab community on Facebook, which just like snowballed into joining lots of other things, about the Break My Game server on Discord. Everything just jumped right in. Entered my first contest in January. Got a tabletop mentorship mini grant, scholarship, whatever they call it. And created a logo and put a website together and just started connecting with people and doing game design. And I know we're going to talk a little about rules tonight. Rules was kind of my entry into the game design world. Mm-hmm. I guess because I'm a writer. I'm a lot of things, but being a writer is one of them. I have a background in both creative writing as a kid, and then throughout college and after college, writing press releases, writing grant proposals, writing website copy, email marketing copy, all kinds of different types of writing, which I think really helps when it comes to writing game rules, because you kind of have to wear different hats. You have to sort of create this world and be imaginative, but you also have to be technical and explain things in a very orderly, specific way so people that can understand them. And then you also have to market your games. So kind of thinking about those different hats you have to wear and the different ways you have to write was something that really attracted me to the game design world. And I think Break My Game was having a rules exchange. And I sort of jumped on and started participating. I was just kind of like a sponge. I wanted to read about all these games that people were creating. And as I was reading, I couldn't help but like correct the grammar or leave a note and say, hey, I noticed this. If you want to take extra help, let me know. And I think between November and the end of January last, I probably read through and corrected like 50 rule books.
Wow.
Oh, that's amazing. And honestly,
yeah. And all for free, right?
You help so many people.
And I learned a lot. I met a lot of people. It was absolutely wonderful. And I got to the point where anytime the word rules was mentioned in BGDL on Facebook, somebody tagged me. So I sort of became known as the rule book chick. So I started charging just because I didn't have enough time.
Sure.
And I wanted to work on my own game designs too. So I started charging for rulebook editing. It's actually turned out to be a really good way to kind of, every time I've done something with a business or a YouTube channel or different things like that, I try not to spend more money than I make. So editing rulebooks is kind of how I fill up my piggy bank, and then designing and ordering prototypes and doing all the
Well, yeah.
Keep that balance.
So it kind of keeps that balance. Yeah.
And I mean, shipping to a boat is, got to be expensive. So there you go.
I pay by the pound. I send it to a courier in
Oh my gosh.
Miami right now, and then it takes 10 to 14 days, sometimes longer, depending on holidays and other things, to get to me on the boat. So
yeah, and your whole origin story brings up a whole lot of stuff that we'll talk about later, about community and rules and constraints, and living on a boat is a constraint in of itself. And I think there's some wonderful stuff in your origin story about how you can enter into the world of game design and become a part of it very quickly by doing. And putting your cards on the table, quite literally, and jump in and help people be better, and it makes you better, and then it gets your name out there, and now people like working with you. And it's not about, oh, I'm giving something away free so that I can be paid later. It's more like, hey, I wanted to be part of this community, and now I still want to be part of the community, but because I have my own goals, I'm going to have to charge, and nobody's blinked an eye.
It's a betterment of both you and the community. Like, that's the thing, is ultimately, like, if it's going to consume your time, you're absolutely right. You have to get paid for what you're doing, because this is an actual job and service. Absolutely. But that's the whole thing. Yeah.
And I will say that the editing and such that I did early on was nowhere near the depth and specificity of the rulebook editing that I do now. Now it's kind of like, I would point things out or say, hey, you introduced this term, but you haven't introduced it earlier, so you need to be consistent about, I'd point out things. But now the rulebook editing process is very, there's like 10 steps in it. And I've sort of come up with a system that I, give away for free to other people, saying, this is how I do it. Feel free to do it my way. It seems to work. Or pay me and I'll walk you through it.
Yeah, right.
Well, rule books are like one of the, unfortunately, usually the most forgotten thing, but like one of the most important blocks of the game itself, because nobody's playing your game if they don't get how.
Absolutely. And that was the number one thing when I was early in the VGDL community. One of the things I wanted to learn from was, what are the mistakes that people make? Because I don't want to make them. What is the worst? Tell me about a game that you bought, but then you were disappointed in, and why? And I expected to get all kinds of different answers, but what I got was rulebook. The rules stuff. I couldn't figure out the rules. I bought it. I couldn't figure out how to play.
Huge barrier.
All rule books, which really surprised me. And if you ask Tom Vassell, what is the one thing that people don't spend enough time on? I'll say rule books. There's a lot of people that just neglect them, and it does seem like it's a lopsided investment, right? Because people are going to read your rules once. When they buy your game, they're going to figure out how to play it, and then they're going to glance at them later to remember, how many cards do I start with, or whatever, and maybe when does the game end, or this special circumstance. So it feels like a lot of time and energy to spend on something that's only going to be used real quickly. But that's a huge, critical point in that process. Like, you've gotten their attention, they've admitted they've purchased the game, they have it in front of them. That first playthrough, if it doesn't go well, it's going to go on the shelf and not be played again, or it's going to go out
or
the door
become
to somebody
despised as that thing that you spent money on and don't know what to do with.
It's got pretty miniatures, at least. I think that's a really good way of looking at Emily, and it's something that I think can help people keep the reality of the rule book at the front of mind. It's like, yes, you only need it once, but it's going to tarnish.
Make or break.
Yeah, it's make or break for the experience, right?
It's also like the first introduction to the game. So it's a great place to set tone, right? Like, I don't think people, you can see when someone's had a lot of fun with the rule book, and I think people will point out to their favorites for those reasons, either because it gives a lot of personality and teaches the game, or because it does it concisely and teaches the game. But there's something neat about being that entry into the game, and definitely use that.
Yeah, well, and also if you're pitching your games too, we're in the midst of judging the small box challenge competitions of the Game Crafter right now. There are 168 entries, of which most of them qualified. So I've been looking at rule books and shop pages and things for the past month, me and the other 9 judges that are part of this. And it's apparent when somebody spent time on their rule book, and you can read through and say, I get this game, I see the fun, I know what it is, versus coming through something that is, I wanted to give every person who entered that contest an equal amount of time and attention, and I really strived to do that and really comb through the rules and made myself do that. And I found a lot of good games that I think got passed over in the community voting process because they were hard to find the core of what was fun and how do you actually play the game.
It's not translating itself properly, kind of.
Exactly, and that was a great exercise to see. It's like looking at a bunch of resumes, right? If you are hiring for a job and you look at 100 resumes, you now know, when I write a resume, this is the kind of stuff.
Do this, don't do this.
Don't do this, do that. Exactly, and that was what reading all these rules early on when I joined into the community was like for me. And it's a good refresher sort of judging this contest to see like, bam, 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 this person did an excellent job writing rules.
And it's interesting because a lot of people don't like to read rules to learn how to play a game, and that's why. It's partly why. But designers, you should do this. You should read the rules, just to know what to do and what not to do. Eric Dahlman says that's why we make a 2-hour tutorial video. They mean for every game, right? And videos show and don't tell. But I think because we transfer so much information in board games through writing, that Emily's correct and you're not that you're correct, not that you're incorrect, Eric, but that as a supplement for sure, that video is awesome. The idea of writing is really important. Yeah, go ahead.
About videos is writing is important in your videos too. So I have a YouTube channel. My husband and I have a YouTube channel called Emily and Clark's Adventure, all about sailing. We have 50,000 YouTube subscribers, which is super fun. We've learned a lot about video in the last 4 years, and one of the things is if you were, for instance, going to write a tutorial about how to play your game, I would use the option to put in, if you put in brackets, the timestamps, and basically put a table of contents in your video. Like, here's how you set up. Then somebody can just click on it and jump right to it. Somebody, here's how to play. Here's an example turn. The writing of the description for YouTube is important too. So even if it's not written rules, there is writing that's involved in that too, or even writing the script for the video, how that flows. It's very similar.
Yeah, and I liked what you said about wearing different hats when you write, especially in games. Game designers are, by and large, wearing lots of hats all the time, but probably never more than when they're writing stuff, because you're right. They are a copy editor. They are writing marketing copy. They're doing technical writing. They are writing prose and sometimes even poetry and songs, depending on the lore of your world, and so you're writing all this stuff, and it's very, very important to know how to do. Eric Tolman then said, I was kidding. Our games take like 30 minutes to play. No. That's definitely an Eric thing to do.
Well, because I was like,
his games are decks of cards, so they're decks of cards. But I do think a video is an important thing that a lot of people are using nowadays, especially with the proliferation of, learning on YouTube and, how to play videos and things like that. So I don't think you're wrong, Eric, but 2 hours, it may be a long tutorial for your games. We'd watch you play like 4 times. Here's how you play the game. Okay, here's how you play the game again and again and once more for the road. So Emily, now that we know a little bit about how you got into the industry, what is your philosophy towards game design in general? What makes an Emily Willix game an Emily Willix game, you think? Have you found that out?
Sure. So when I started, Small Free Games is kind of my persona for all things game design, just because I like to keep my life a little bit segmented. My YouTube stuff is my YouTube stuff. My game design stuff is game design. My business stuff, all separate segments, keeps things interesting. And I always say we when we talk about Small Furry Games, but it's just me. Someday maybe it'll be we. But
the royal we.
The royal we. So when I decided, okay, I need to have this game design, storefront persona, so I can start doing business and talking about my games and be memorable and that sort of thing. I had this conversation with myself, like, what kind of games do I want to create? Who am I? Where am I going? Who do I want to bring with me? Those sorts of things. And I think we all start from a game design point of what are the games that I like to play? What are the games that I would want to play with my friends? Living on a boat, we have very limited space. So while we do have some bigger games like Stone Age and some other things, most of the games that I'm attracted to are small games that don't take a whole lot of time to set up. I had this moment, we were playing Stone Age, for instance, last year, And we set it all up and put it all out on the table, and we played a game, and we're like, we should play it again because we got it out, right? And then we were done. We're like, let's just leave it out, and we'll play it again tomorrow. It was like we were like trying to make it worth the setup for us versus packing it all away. And I should add, I don't keep game boxes.
No.
There you are. Okay.
Hey, you don't keep game boxes.
You don't keep big game boxes.
So this is what my game design collection looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever.
All the little photo cases and things.
The boards are here. I have a couple different board containers, and then I keep things in plastic bags and things. There's a couple of these deep, and there's some other ones up top. But everything is repackaged to save space, because I could take like 10 board games on our trip, or I could take 40 if I repackaged them. So like, well, easy. Anyway, so small games was important to me. And living on a boat, we have a very transient social network. Sort of, come into a bay and we might have friends here, or we might be totally starting from scratch, meeting somebody new. So we play a lot of 2-player games, or we play games that are easy to introduce people to, especially people who aren't necessarily native English speakers. That's a big thing too.
So language independent, yeah.
Exactly. So actually not a small box game, but Mysterium. It's Halloween, so I'm thinking about Halloween games. Mysterium is one of my favorite games to play with people who speak different languages, because you can just do the whole thing by pointing. It's fun. So I wanted to design games that were small, kind of easy to set up, had high social interaction. And I've worked in retail and worked with products and things before, and I always get a pit in my stomach when I'm selling plastic things wrapped in plastic from China sold to people who don't necessarily need them. So I always have an eye on, like, how can I make this more sustainable? I'm living on a boat, see garbage floating around. I'm closer to garbage, and I'm closer to the effects of plastic, I guess. So that's something that I personally think about.
Oh no. She'll come back. I will say there's a lot of large companies, thankfully, that are moving towards using C plastics, like literally stuff, depending on like how far out it's gone, to repurpose and like turn into gaming parts.
And there's a lot of talk right now about, can we make even things like inserts out of recycled cardboard instead? So I think as the generations change in terms of people who are designing, people who are publishing, people who are running the factories, we'll get to see a bunch of new technologies and new things where we are getting what we want out of the world without, without wrecking the world. Here we go.
We were just talking.
Oh, sorry. There's Erica.
That's okay, you bumped me.
Sorry.
No. We were just talking about, Emily, how different companies are making the move now, thankfully, especially like larger companies, to using like actual like ocean plastics, like collected plastics, and turning them into like parts for games. Obviously, there needs to be more of a push for that, but at least people are making at least that kinds of effort.
Yeah. And then, even lots of talk about, how can you reduce, just even a little bit. You get people saying, oh, that won't change the world on a global scale. Well, I mean,
it'll slow things down.
Slow things down. Okay. Like, let's do something. Let's do something rather than nothing. And that's another constraint. You talk a lot about that, Emily. I think, even just the idea of living on a boat is a constraint. The idea of running a small box contest, a contest where you're limited to the size of the box, or a mint tin or whatever. Why do you like constraints so much? What other types of constraints have you put on yourself? And why do you think it's a good way to design?
Now, you guys are black.
Oh, hi.
Hi, there I am. Okay, I've got more bars now. We'll see. So I think constraints help direct designs. I think I've got so many Google folders full of design ideas, but when there's a contest or there's a publisher who mentions they're looking for a certain kind of game, I can zero in on something and develop it. And I think I got a lot of feedback on the small box challenge that people were entering a contest for the first time. They'd never entered a contest before because it just seemed like, oh, it's a little box.
It should be doable.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great way to start. We talked before the show. I'm trying to right now develop a game idea that I had last month. It was a Christmas game, and I was like, well, if this is going to be a game this year, it's got to be a game quick. So I kind of set this goal that I wanted to develop this game by the end of, I guess, like the first week in November. So I kind of wanted to develop a game in a month. There was something I did called Crash Test Cohorts, where a bunch of designers got together and they play tested the same game every week for 4 weeks and tried to move it all forward and develop it and give constructive feedback and move that forward. And I got good feedback on that too, that it was just kind of the kick in the pants that a lot of people needed in order to get a design going. So I think constraints can be helpful. It's questions that you don't have to answer, and you can focus on the fun and the real relevant questions.
It's like
that's a
having
really nice
direction.
way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice way of thinking about it. Questions you don't have to answer because they're done for you, right? You can't
They've
make
been
it bigger than this
decided.
box. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been decided. You can't make a board that's that big because it won't fit in the box. That is the constraint.
Or use your imagination on how that's possible.
Right? Or yeah, you figure it out. Well, what if we didn't have a board? We made it out of 20 cards. Okay, now what happens, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. So about the small box contest, that was something you organized, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And you have the help of other judges, but why did you decide to run a contest? What was it about contests that really, get your design ethos across?
It's a good question. I think entering my first contest back in January was something that really motivated me and let me see all the different facets that there are of game design. Talking about different hats, I had to make a shop page. I had to describe my game in a marketing fun way that would catch someone's attention in 2 minutes or 2 sentences, whatever. I had to think about art. I had to think about all the things that I'm not necessarily good at, or that I don't find that aren't the most favorite parts of game design for me, and I had to kind of do all of them, and all of them informed all the other parts. So I felt like I designed a better game because I focused on the rules, and I made better art because I was focused on the player interaction and what the board looked like, and I made all the things worked together, and I felt like it was a real growth experience, and it was also a great way to connect to the community. And I think I'm just community is just something that makes its way into every single thing that I do. I had a small business before. It was like a consulting company for small businesses and nonprofits. And I was always bringing in freelancers and bringing in other people to help me, because it's all who you know, and it's opening up and sharing those things. And I think a community is a great way to do that, not just because you're getting your game out for other people to see it, but people are putting out their game beforehand and getting feedback saying, oh, hey, what do you guys think of my shop page? And somebody will say, oh, I think you should do this. Or somebody will be having trouble with art, and an artist will step in and say, hey, I'll help you out with that, or I'll read your rules. So I just see all these people that have certain weaknesses and people that have certain strengths, and it's just really beautiful, I think, in life and in everything else, to see people come together in ways where your weaknesses and strengths complement one another, and everybody learns in the process. So
it's super important in the board game community in general, because in all honesty, most of this stuff is self-taught, self-learned, and you don't know what you don't know till you don't know it, right? And so that can be a really long process or very short if you have enough people helping you along the way. That's the most interesting thing about game design, is it's really whatever pace you can go, but the more people you have around you, the faster you will go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Adam,
and I will say that the game design community is probably the most open, welcoming, supportive community that I've ever been in for anything, for work or hobbies or anything like that. It's not just like go, go, rah, rah, cheerleading. There is some of that going on, but people really care about helping you make your game the best game possible. If you're on the Break My Game server or doing another play test through another organization, people are going to compliment your game and say, wow, this is really impressive that you've gotten this far. This is something that I think you should take a look at that's worthwhile. And they're usually coming from a place of experience. And, I always leave those things feeling like, yeah, I did do something cool, but oh wow, I've just opened up this part of my mind and unlocked this idea that I didn't have before this playtest session.
Or you couldn't have thought that way until somebody actually kind of introduced it to you in the first place, right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing we have to learn is it's a fastest way to get new perspectives is because let's be honest, you haven't played every game and we don't know everything. And you have to, it's one of the best reasons for co-designers, you know what I mean? Or like, you know, having a great, you know, development community, whatever it is, it's like you need other people's expertise and eyeballs. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, unless you are embodying every single game player out there,
you are the best.
It's real important to put your
nobody
games
has
out.
all the stuff. Nobody knows all this stuff. I mean, I live on a boat. I carry 3 months of food with me all the time. We make our own water from the ocean, our own energy from the wind and the sun. We don't have everything. We still need other people. So everybody needs other people for lots of things.
Yeah. That's a good way to think about it. We call it interdependence in the disability community.
Absolutely.
Where we're not independent. We are interdependent on other people to do everything. And even people who are able-bodied are still interdependent on other people to do all the things that you need to do in order to make your life, you know, livable. It just may not be physical help here, and it might not be that, but you might still need, you know, you don't carry your mail across the country to drop it off in your friend's mailbox in another province or another state. So you're interdependent, right, on the mail system, on the government, on all these things. Adam Young, because I have the thing up here, said, I always find out about contests too late, but the constraints are always inspiring. And that's a great way to put it in terms of inspiration from the constraint. Once you have, like Emily, you said, those little corners of the game kind of cut off from you and say, you can't do that, and you can't do that. Some people say, oh, well, then I can't make a game. And other people are like, more people are like, oh, now I can make a game, right? Because I am inspired to, like, how could I make a game that only uses 26 cards exactly or whatever the rule is?
It's not overwhelming. Like, actually, funny enough, it's easy to throw a bajillion rules at something. It's actually funnier. It's way easier to throw everything into a game. It is far harder to actually work to the constraints. But the nice thing is they seem so much more doable if you're going to jump in for like the first time. You know what I mean? Like, it's this really interesting little, you know, double-edged thing once you get into design. But I think it's honestly the best place to start. It's amazing actually how many people come on Maple Syrup. I have to say that contests tend to be one of the top, like, how did you get into designs? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I saw this neat little contest. It was just so many cards.
I'd give it a hand.
Or it was like this 2-day game jam, whatever it is. It's interesting. Like, that was their like, oh, this is neat. Like,
well, I mean, it's that spark that then continues, and like, I put it down and I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I just made it.
I want to do a new one, or what if I did this? Or
So actually, my first published game, Battle Dental, which I just signed with Bright Eye Games in the UK in July, was a contest entry. And it was not only a contest entry, it was a failed contest entry from an earlier contest. So I was messing around with some pieces for the Game Crafted Community Anthology. And I was messing around with the white ones and the yellow ones, and they started to look like